There's a Christmas painting I've been saving just for you. It's unique, it's enchanting, and the best part is it's easier than it looks. Today we're creating a holiday scene unlike anything you've seen before, so stick around because this one holds a few secrets. All right, let's start by gathering up a few supplies. I've got here my watercolor paints and a paper towel, some clean water, and then of course some brushes. I'll be using some from my personally designed craftamo set today. I'll pull out the number 10 round and the number 3 round. And as a side note, for some exciting news, if you haven't heard yet, these brushes are actually back in stock right now. These would make a terrific Christmas gift for either yourself or someone else, so make sure you check them out using the link in the description of this video. Okay, another supply that we need today is a bit of masking fluid. Now, you could probably go around the area that we're going to mask off instead if you don't have this on hand, but the masking fluid will definitely make this painting easier and quicker if you have some. And then to go along with the masking fluid, I've pulled out a couple of small, old round brushes that I have on hand. I don't like to use my nicer, more expensive brushes with masking fluid because it can potentially gum up the bristles. But to help clean out the brushes, I do put a little bit of liquid dish soap in the bristles, and that works pretty good. I ruined a brush or two in my day before I learned that trick. And one more brush that we need for today to help us create the fun bokeh effect on this piece is more of a coarse, tough, bristled brush. Brushes that maybe you use for oil painting, they tend to work pretty good for this. So you'll probably want one that's a little bit more on the smaller side of things, but I'll show you how all of this works in just a minute. Now, one last tool, which again is optional, but will definitely save you some time and make the process easier, is some sort of round stencil or template. It doesn't have to be as fancy as this. Any kind of circular opening would probably work. I'll leave links and information for this particular template in the description of the video, along with links and information for any of the other products you see me using today, just in case you'd like to look into anything further though. Okay, let's get to painting. So let me pull out some watercolor paper here. Now you can do this on whatever size of paper you want. This is lovely as a larger piece that can be framed, but it would also make some terrific Christmas cards. So that choice is up to you. On my paper here, I do have a lightly penciled drawing of a pine tree off to the left side of the page. This isn't anything too complicated or difficult, so if you want to draw your own pine tree, you can do that, or you can even just freehand it if that's your preferred method. But for those of you who would rather just skip right to the fun of painting, I will have this little tree outline available in my Etsy shop in both a larger size as well as some smaller card sizes if you would find that helpful. Then all you have to do is print that out and trace it right onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. And actually, I should also announce I am having a sale in my Etsy shop in honor of the Black Friday / Cyber Monday weekend. Everything in my Etsy shop is at a 25% discount, so make sure to take advantage of that. I'll leave a link for my Etsy shop in the description of this video as well. All right, I'm just taping my paper down really quickly with some artist tape. This is going to help a little bit with the warping, but it is also going to create a fun little border around the page too, and that's going to look really neat in the end. Okay, the first thing that we are going to want to do is use some of the masking fluid to block out the pine tree. I want the pine tree to be snowy looking with a darker color in the background to really set it off. So using the masking fluid will make things easier and quicker when it comes to painting in the background. But like I say, if you don't have masking fluid, you can skip this step and just move on to the next and then just carefully paint around the tree instead. I'm just going to apply the fluid on here using one of these thin, small, old brushes. And again, I've got a little bit of soap in the bristles here just to help with the cleanup later. Now, there's nothing too hard or complicated about this process. I'm just spreading the fluid on here, blocking off the little hillside that the tree sits on, as well as the tree itself, the trunk and the branches. Now, this is going to take a few minutes to complete, but I really do think it's worth it in the end. The brush I'm using here isn't super good at creating fine points for some of the ends of these branches, so I think what I'm going to do here is use this brush to paint in the majority larger space of the tree, and then I'll come back in here with a smaller, more fine brush to paint in the more thin points of the branches in just a minute. Okay, my main tree is pretty much filled in now, so I'm going to pull out that thin brush and just add some fine points on some of the tips of these pine branches to really finish it off. All right, I know that took a minute to complete, but great job. I think you are going to be glad that you took the time to do that. Now, we need to let this all completely dry before we can paint over it, but while I'm thinking about it and while I still have the masking fluid out, I think I'm actually going to add one more thing to this painting. I'll pull out that other brush that's a little bit bigger in size and maybe throw in a few circles or dots kind of off to the right side of the page. I don't have these drawn on, so I'm just adding them where I think they might look good, and then I'm also going to paint them in different sizes as well. I plan to have the background color be the darkest and most prominent right around the tree, and then I'm going to have it fade off as we move to the right side of the page. So if I add a few circles of masking fluid over here, we'll get some fun white snowflakes, and you'll see that it'll fit nicely with the bokeh effect we'll be adding in later. You'll just have to trust me here, I guess. Okay, I think that is good enough. So go wash out your masking fluid brushes right now before they start to dry. But my tree at this point is pretty much dry. So all I need to do is let the circles finish drying. And then while we wait and give that a little bit more time, let's go ahead and start pulling out some colors on our tray for the background wash. Now you can use whatever color you would like for this. Blue, a dark green, or even a gray would look really cool. But today I'm going to be bold and striking, so I'm going to try using red. First, I have here some pure cadmium red color, and then I'll mix up some darker red colors as well. So let's try cadmium red mixed with some ivory black to make a dark shadow red color. Those look pretty good, but we probably also need a red that kind of fits in between these two colors. So let's try some cadmium red mixed with some alizarin crimson with maybe just a touch of black if it needs to be darker, but not too much this time. We don't want to dull this one down too much. All right, let's go ahead and paint in the background wash. We'll be painting this wet on wet to help that color blend better and more smoothly, and this is also going to keep that paint from drying out too quickly so that we have more time to work. So using the number 10 round brush, we'll take some water and just start spreading that out, starting on the left side of the page and then moving it out towards the right side, maybe just a little over halfway of the page, at least until we get those circle dots of masking fluid that we added in over there covered. All right, now because my water was pretty tainted, I do think I need to soften up this edge here with my paper towel so I don't end up getting too hard of lines on this lighter red side. But then we are ready to start adding in the color. Let's work our way from the lighter red to the darker red. So take a touch of that pure cadmium red color and let's start placing that in here first. I'll again start dropping this in on the left side of the page, and then we'll work our way towards the right, going right over the top of the tree, or I guess if you need to, carefully around it if you don't have the masking fluid on there. Okay, we are just working really quickly here, but this is a pretty good start. We can play around with it more in just a minute. But while this is all still wet, let's go ahead and add in some of the medium dark red color and blend that into the cadmium red on our page to create some contrasting values. I think I'll focus this color more near the bottom area here and maybe just right around the tree to really make that pop. I'm going to try to work quickly though. We don't want this paint to start drying out just yet. All right, that's probably good enough for that color. So let's take some of the darkest shadow red now and add a touch of that to the bottom left corner of the page, and then maybe spreading it up to the bottom part of the tree a little bit too. Okay, this is pretty good. Now my paper is still wet, so I think I can play around with this just a little bit more without ruining it. But if yours has started to dry, then you may want to call it done. But I think I'm going to add a touch more of that pure cadmium red in here just to make it a tad more vibrant. I'm also going to take a bit of extra water in my brush and spread and soften the edges of the color off to the right side of the page. I really want this color to sort of fade out gently into the white side, and I also need to make sure that all of my masking fluid circles over here are actually covered up too. If your paint colors have started to dry at this point, but you'd like to fade out or soften the edges a little bit over here, you can also just use a damp brush and rub at the hard edges a little bit and dab some of that color off using your paper towel. Okay, good enough. This is a great start to this piece. Now, we do need this background wash to dry before we can move on. So this is a great time to take a quick break if you need to. Here I am popping in again. I think my paint is pretty much dry now, so let's see if we can continue on. Unfortunately, my colors don't seem to be quite as bright and vibrant now that it's dry, but oh well, it's hard to tell sometimes what the paint is going to do. Okay, moving on. The next step here is to create the fun bokeh effect within the background area so that it looks like falling snow in the background or something. So this is where the more coarse oil brush and the round template come in handy. All I have to do here is take that template, pick a circle size, lay it down on my page where I want some circles of lighter color to be, then I'll wet my brush a little bit and then just scrub at the paper and paint around and around in a circle shape. I'll lift the template off the page, take my paper towel, and then dab off any excess water and paint, and voila! Look at that. It is just like magic. We just created a lovely, soft circle shape that can represent snow falling gently in the background, and it really is just that easy. So I'm going to just go ahead and add in some more of different sizes. But now if you don't have a template, you still can just use a coarse brush and rub that paint in a circle shape and then lift it off with the paper towel anyway. You're just going to have to create your own circle instead of using the pre-made shape to follow. Now this takes a few minutes to do, so just sit back and enjoy the process. It really is kind of like magic. I find that having these circles in the background also helps detract from any of the imperfections that I might have in my wash also, so that's a definite plus. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. If you find that you do like my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any new and upcoming tutorials I have planned. I actually painted this piece a while back and I've been saving it until I felt like the time was right. And if I'm thinking right, then this video is actually going to come out on Thanksgiving Day. So for those of you who are celebrating Thanksgiving today, I hope you are having a wonderful time with family and friends and eating lots of turkey and pumpkin pie. In such a chaotic and uncertain world, it's kind of nice to just take a step back and look at all the wonderful things that we have to be thankful for. Okay, great job. Now for the fun part. And you might be thinking, Liesl, that was the fun part. But this is it, the unmasking. I'm just going to take a good eraser here and rub at this masking fluid a little bit to help get it off the page. Or if you need to, you can just use your fingers. Oh, I love that. It is so satisfying. I just love how the painting looks after you take the masking fluid off. And we really do have a nice outline of our pine tree too. So before we get to some of the details on the pine tree, I do just want to do one more thing to our background area. I'm going to take some really light or watered down paint, and actually you might even be able to just use the rinse water for this. I'll use the number 3 round brush and paint in some light red circle shapes off to to the right side of the page here to add to our transition from the red to the white. This is optional, but I think it kind of adds a really fun element here. I really want to keep this nice and light though, just so that it's very subtle. So if you ever get the color a little bit too dark, you can use your paper towel and dab at that just a little bit and take some of the color off. All right, good enough. Let's add some very subtle touches of color to our snowy areas now. This is just going to give all of this a little bit of dimension and make it look a little bit more realistic. I'm just going to mix up a dull sort of grayish blue color by mixing some ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of Payne's gray together. I'm also going to add some extra water in the mix here. We want this color to be very light in value. Now using the number 3 round brush and a bit of this blue color, I'll start down here at the very base of the tree and kind of shape in an area under this low branch for a bit of shadow in the snow. I'll also take just a touch more of that color, maybe watered down even more just so that we have only a hint of color, and spread that out through this little hillside to create some shadows and bumps into here. I'm just painting this wet on dry, but if you need to, after you get some color or paint on there, you can spread it out a little bit by just taking a tiny bit of water in your brush and stretching that paint out gently to the sides. We really don't need a lot of this, just a few little touches. Okay, great. Now let's kind of do the same thing up here in the branches of the tree. This is also just wet on dry. I'll take a touch of color and paint that on in a few spots, and then I'll lighten and spread the paint out a little bit more with some extra water in my bristles. Again, we don't need a lot of this, just small hints of color. We just want to kind of focus the placement of this where we think that the shadows might be. So most of mine are going to be focused around the bottom areas of the branches, but this should be quick and simple. Don't stress about it too much or take a ton of time on this part. This is just subtle hints of shadow to bring in some dimension. Awesome job. That wasn't too hard, hopefully, and it really does add to the overall look of the piece. The last thing we need to do is add in a touch of color for the trunk of the tree. So let's pull out a little bit of brown color, maybe some burnt umber, mixed with just a touch of ivory black to darken it just a little bit more. I'm just going to paint this sort of in the same way as we just did with the branches of the tree, wet on dry, with just a touch of color at first off to one side of the trunk. Then I'll rinse out my brush a little bit and use some water to sort of spread and soften the color out a little ways. Again, we don't need a lot of this either, just some hints of it here and there poking out amongst the branches of the tree. And that, my friends, is actually all there is to this painting. Didn't it turn out so cool? I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off from around the edges here, and we will see if we have a nice border. Yes, again, this is just like magic. I love the final reveal of the piece. This was so much fun to do. It wasn't hard or super time consuming, and the finished product is really quite unique and striking. This is actually one of my favorite Christmas paintings that I've done this year, so I'm really glad you were here to share it with me. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.